All righty, we are back, and first of all, I want to know, I've noticed an extraordinary number of new listeners on TalkShoe this afternoon. I'm guessing that's because Dave's here and Linda's here, but might also have to do something with the fact that our next guest is Robert Kiyosaki. So to all the people that are listening on TalkShoe for the first time, thanks for joining us, but try to make it a habit. We'd love you to stick around. We have a number of terrific guests on this show, and if you are an entrepreneur or a business owner, you definitely want to stay tuned to this station. You will learn a lot about business. I myself am a 13-time entrepreneur. I run the Center for Entrepreneurial Studies at Duquesne University here in Pittsburgh, and also have started this radio show 11 years ago. We've been doing this for 11 years now. Not weekly. It was a Saturday show at first. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get to our guest, Robert Kiyosaki. Robert, are you there?
I'm here.
All righty. Thank you so much for joining us here this afternoon. In studio with me, by the way, Robert, is David Nelson, one of my frequent co-hosts and himself a multiple-time entrepreneur. Dave, meet Robert Kiyosaki.
My pleasure.
How you guys doing?
All righty. And also Linda Thomas. Let me explain why Linda's here. Linda, by the way, brings the good-looking quotient way up in the room. She enhances the environment considerably. Linda is a regular listener to this show, and over the years hasn't missed too many of these shows. And so I was on the phone with her one time. Never met her, but we were talking on the telephone, and I said, look, she brought up your name, and she said, are you ever planning to have Robert Kiyosaki on? I said, sure, why not? We'll get him. And she said, well, I said, I'll tell you what, if that ever happens, you can come in and help me interview him. So Linda took advantage of that offer. So she's going to help me interview you here today.
Oh, thank you, Linda.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
All right. Where are you today, Robert?
I'm in Phoenix.
All righty. You're doing better than, actually, it's probably about the same, a little less humid. You have a new book out, and I'd like to talk about that. But before we do talk about that, maybe a couple things about you. I mean, I realize a lot of your life is an open book, pardon the pun. You are the product of two fathers. I'm reminded of Bronx Tale when I think of two fathers, but one father was your own father, who was a conservative, play it by the numbers kind of guy, who said, study hard, get good grades in school, go to school as long as you can, find a secure, reputable company, and all will be well, which was great advice, perhaps. I'm not even sure if it was then, in the earlier part of the 20th century. And then you had this other gentleman that was more of a wild man, more of a risk taker, and a guy that said, no, you don't want to do that. You want to control your own life. You want to, in effect, be an entrepreneur. Fair summary of where Rich Dad, Poor Dad came from?
Yeah, I wouldn't say he was a risk taker. I would say my poor dad, being a school teacher, was risk averse. It's a very big difference.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, that's well said. And but out of that came this really kind of a 30-year tutelage, right? That you were able to profit from their advice for quite a while.
Right. From the age of 9, my rich dad was my mentor or coach.
Mm-hmm.
And it was quite confusing because I grew up in Hawaii. And my poor dad, school teacher, PhD, great guy, always to go to school, get good grades, and get a job, for either a corporation or the government. And my rich dad said, well, you'll never get rich that way. And if you look at the Forbes 400 list today, you don't find any CEOs on that list. Today, the guys on the Forbes 400 are entrepreneurs.
Yep, pretty much self-made guys. That's exactly right. By the way, you didn't have to run into President Obama being raised in Hawaii, did you?
No, we didn't run in the same circle.
Okay, all right.
He was smart and I was a dummy.
Where did you go to school? I missed that part. You went on to Florida State, wasn't it? Or
No. I went to school in New York.
New York, okay.
I had nominations to Naval Academy and Merchant Marine Academy, and I took Merchant Marine Academy because we're the highest paid graduates in the world. And back in the 60s when we graduated, many of my classmates were making about $90,000 to $160,000 a year, which was not much money. It's not much money today. Most guys make that now graduating, but back then it was a fortune.
Mm-hmm.
And most of my classmates, not my other classmates, they were very happy if they made $18,000 a year upon graduation. So we're making at least 10 times the average college grad rate. So
right.
I sailed. My my college degree is a Bachelor of Science, which stands for BS, and my license is I sailed on the Love Boat and passenger liners and freighters and tankers.
Now,
and then I flew for the Marine Corps after that.
yes, I did see you were in the Marine Corps, and thank you for your service, by the way. Now,
thank you.
when you then you went on to build a couple of significant companies. Can you tell us a little bit about them, because they're not really described, at least not in the stuff I've read?
Well, when I came back from Vietnam, which was 1973, my poor dad was unemployed, and even though he was a PhD and he was a good guy and all this, he had bought himself a franchise because he ran for lieutenant governor against his boss, the governor. And when he lost the election, the governor said, "You'll never get a job again." And so
Wow.
for the very first time, my dad, back then in the 70s, at the age of 50, left the world of school. So he found out he was school smart, but not street smart.
Mm-hmm.
So he bought an ice cream franchise and immediately lost all of his investors' money plus his retirement. So when I come back from the war, he's unemployed, and here I was a Marine lieutenant, and I come back, and I said, what I should do now? He said, "Why don't you fly for the Marine Corps?" I said, I'm good at combat. I'm not good at peacetime." And he says, "Well, why don't you get a job with the airlines?" And I said, "I've already done that. Why don't you go back to Standard? I work for Standard Oil as a tanker officer." And I said, "I've already done that." And he said, "Well, go back to school, get your master's, your PhD, and get a job with the government." And that's when I realized my dad really was clueless as to the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, at the age of about 25 or 26, I went to listen to my rich dad, who was an entrepreneur, and by then he was one of the richest guys in Hawaii, and followed in his footsteps.
And how did your rich dad become so wealthy?
He was in hotels and restaurants, but more his unfair advantage he had was he was a builder. He started off as a builder, so he could build and construct his homes. I mean, his hotels. So his costs were really low.
Mm-hmm.
But then he was very good at he was a fighter. I mean, in many more ways than one.
Mm-hmm.
So he bought this hotel right smack dab in the middle of Waikiki Beach that nobody wanted, and it had an unfair lease on the property where where the owner could escalate the lease every year. So my rich dad bought the property for $1.2 million. I mean, it's massive property, and everybody thought he was nuts. Excuse me. And then once he secured the property, he took the owner to court and sued him for whatever he sued him for, and he won a 30-year lease out of him. And once he had the 30-year lease, he sold out, and that was it. He was finished.
He was on his way. And
so the lease, getting the lease extension was what made him a fortune, and today the Hyatt Hotel sits on it.
So when you decided to write Rich Dad, Poor Dad, what were some of the things that were, what were some of the objectives, some of the goals that you had in mind? Did you just want the world to say, hey, you retired at 47, I retired at 49. My thing was to start this talk show and try to tell people, here's how you can build a business, and there's another way. You don't have to work for people. Was that what you were thinking? I'm going to just try to get as many people as I can to follow this same path?
No, it was, I could see this financial disaster coming, this crisis.
Okay.
If you read my other books.
And I have not, I must admit. I've only read Business for the 21st Century.
Okay. I've been saying to people that the job security was finished. These 401ks and mutual funds are the biggest ripoffs I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And that the rules of money were changed. And so I was very well received with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which came out in 1990.